Good afternoon and welcome to the National Association of Extension Program and Staff Development Professionals Member Connect. This is our second ever Member Connect session, so we thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. This is a great informal conversation between our members and our panelists. We've got three great panelists today who will introduce themselves in just one moment. But before we do that, I want to introduce you to our moderator and host for today, Diane Mashburn from the University of Arkansas Extension. And Diane will give us a little bit of housekeeping instructions on how you as the attendees can communicate today and get to learn about our session, as well as then go on to introduce our panelists. So Diane, will you take it away, please?
Okay. Good morning, everybody. So the way we have things set up today, we have a webinar format for you guys today. So mainly you'll be hearing from our panelists. And if you have any questions or comments, or say our panelists ask for your input on things, today you're going to be using the Q&A box. So it should be along the top of your Zoom screen. You should see Q&A. If you're on any kind of tablet, iPad, anything like that, it'll be on the right-hand side. And if you're on a PC, laptop, it's going to be on the left-hand side. So what you can do is you can just click on that Q&A box, type in your question, send it on the way. And I will be the one that will be feeding our panelists their questions as we go. And so just put in your questions as we go, and wherever we have a nice place to interject those questions, we'll do that. And sometime our panelists may have some feedback. They want some input from you guys, maybe have a question that they want to see what you guys are doing where you are. So go ahead and use that Q&A box for that as well. So, and if you're having any other problems at that point, you can also kind of send that way, and I can respond one-on-one with you, so through that Q&A box. So with that, I think that's all the kind of housekeeping things I have. So I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves. And we're going to start out with Karen. So I'm going to throw it over to her. Karen, you're muted.
Did you unmute me? Okay, thank you. I should know better. I tell people to mute and unmute all the time. Thank you for having me. This is my first time with the NAEPSDP folks, and I've heard some great things. I work with the Military Families Learning Network, and in the past year, I know Bridget Scott, our evaluation specialist, was able to attend the December conference or meeting and had a really great time there. I have probably, it might be better for me to tell a short story than to explain what I do. I have a background in horticulture, and that came as out of a passion for being very curious about how things learn, how people learn, how things grow. I can't kind of get enough of what you learn from gardening. And that translated later to my graduate work at University of Minnesota, where I compared the online versus face-to-face Master Gardener training courses. And so we really found when we measured the knowledge gained that things were pretty equal between the online versus the face-to-face group. But one of the things that was exciting to me was how people exchanged insights through chat forums and instant messaging and things like that they weren't doing in the face-to-face class. So that curiosity kind of followed me through to work with e-extension. And I originally worked with the consumer horticulture community of practice, and I started out doing content development, but really needed to focus on community development. So we worked with the Master Gardener coordinators from across the country and set up basically a community of practice which would learn and share program management ideas, how it's being implemented across the country. And so that's still being run today. They would be a great group to talk to for further sessions. They hold monthly web conferences, and then have a blog and some other things. So it's really been fun to watch that community of practice grow through the last several years. And then now I'm with the Military Families Learning Network, and we get to work, we get to serve military service professionals, providing them research-based information that they can share with others. And we hope to connect them and build online community with them so they can serve military families and use each other as a resource. So I hope that's not too long of a story, but I think it helps provide a little bit of background. And I'm excited to be here today and hear what you are all learning and doing in your universities and counties. So thank you.
Okay, so now Carrie, can you introduce yourself, please?
Good morning here on the West Coast. We're still in the morning time, but my name is Carrie Stark, and I am currently the State 4-H Program Director in Nevada. But prior to that, I have not done a lot of staff development in Nevada because I've literally been there about a month now. So, but prior to that, I was at the University of Idaho as a 4-H Youth Development Specialist and did a lot of online staff development during that time. And so, you know, it's one of those, we're actually looking at moving a lot of the things that we had done to more of a regional model rather than state specific. So I'm still in the process of doing a lot of online development.
Okay, and now Ed Bender will introduce himself.
Well, thank you, Diane. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna share a couple slides that I have for you. I'd like to say thanks for inviting me here today, especially Carrie. She's the one that pulled me in here in short order, and I always like talking about online learning. So I'm gonna flip over my screen. Let me know if you're seeing everything, and then I can get going. Again, thanks for allowing me to be here. This is my first year as a member of this association. And I, too, would probably like to share a little story of some of my background just to bring everything into context with where I am with virtual delivery of training. I started my extension career back in '82, and I actually, not my extension career, I started my career once I graduated from college in 1982, but I was working with adjudicated dependent and delinquent youth and became an agency coordinator through that time. It wasn't until 1999 that I got involved with 4-H, and I was a county educator in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and I just really enjoyed the transition from working with kids that were part of the system to working with kids in a prevention mode. And then in 2012, I started working as a consultant for National 4-H Council as the 4-H science guy, working with the training with the 4-H science initiative that we had. And then in July of 2013, I actually became a full-time employee at National Council, and I became the manager of professional and volunteer development. And then recently in February, my new title and my new responsibilities started, and I'm the Director of Corporate Employee Engagement and Educational Technologies. So, you know, I sort of grew into the whole technology thing as I moved on. Back at the beginning of my career in Extension, the county Extension coordinator or director, after he interviewed me and hired me, suggested that if I really wanted to go far in Extension, one of the things I needed to do was learn technology any way I could, because he really saw that as the future of us being able to deliver training and information to our stakeholders and to our peers and whatnot. So obviously I jumped in, I learned technology all I could. I had a commute that consisted of an hour each way. So I spent a lot of time listening to podcasts on technology and leadership, and then as soon as I could, I would start applying and exploring some of the sites and things that I had. And then, like many of you here, a transition to a lot of the training that we started to receive over time obviously was face-to-face initially, but over time, we started to do more through like Adobe Connect, GoToMeetings. Actually, this is my first time on Zoom, so forgive me now if I make any mistakes. But you know what? I'm okay with making mistakes. I've done it my entire career. Anyway, my background in delivering content, delivering training, really virtually started back when I was an extension educator, and I did a lot with Adobe Connect with my peers. But when I made the move to 4-H Council, my responsibilities changed, and I did a lot of training, a lot of delivery online. So back in 2013, we hosted the first ever 4-H Science E-Academy, where we delivered 18 sessions over 6 days. From there, we graduated into, I delivered a healthy living healthcare summit by United Healthcare, which was 4 sessions over 2 days. So we started to develop how we wanted to train and how we wanted to do things, and learned a lot of lessons along the way. 2014 into, actually we have one coming up in the next week or so. We've had a Healthy Living webcast series where we deliver a Healthy Living webcast monthly. And then in 2014, then again this year, we held the Meet the Author webcast series that was held specifically primarily February and March of each year, with where we allowed any of the curriculum developers to come and share the content and their work with their peers. In 2014, we held another e-conference. This was on the volunteer engagement, activation, and recruitment resources and the pilots that we ran. So we held there 8 sessions over 4 days. And then we just wrapped up in the month of April. We had an e-academy on teen leadership. We had 10 sessions over 5 days. We did 2 sessions each Wednesday afternoon with that event. And then just recently, we part of the NAE4HA virtual professional development committee that I work on with Carrie. We actually decided early on last year, actually at our national meeting, that we wanted to do some professional development ongoing. So we, back in, Carrie, do you remember the month? I don't remember now. It was like probably April as well. We held 2 sessions, and we'll hold 2 more again this fall. So my background actually over the last 3 years when I've been at council is I just seem to, that's all I do is webcasts, probably hundreds of them. And this is a brief list here. So I'm going to stop sharing now if I can and get back and turn it over for discussions. Sorry I rambled on. Diane, it's all yours.
Actually, I think I'm going to pass it over to Kevin to kind of bring up some different points that we were discussing.
I think one of the biggest things with staff development is when is it appropriate to go online with staff development and when face-to-face is preferable, and kind of what is that, to each of our panelists, what does that mix look like, or where have you found that there have been successes in online? Is it a particular subject matter? Is it a audience? What makes online preferable to face-to-face in those situations?
Well, I'm going to jump in here and answer that, because I've been having a lot of that conversation right now, being in a new state that has never had any kind of online staff development. But I think I still strongly believe in face-to-face, but what I found is time gets to be the biggest issue nowadays with staff development. People just, and the travel dollars. And so the way I found, one of the things that I had implemented, in 2009 actually, is 4-H is orientation sessions. And so we do those about once a month or once every couple of weeks. And those, I think, lend themselves very well to an online community or an online staff development. it'd be nice to do them face-to-face, but it's a lot of information. And so if you can chunk things out, I think that's where it makes it nice for an online. The other piece is if it's critical information that needs to get out right away. So some of the issues in animal health have been a big one in the last couple of years. And that's something that, people from campus can't get out and do training, but you could schedule a webinar and you can get variety of people. What I found is it's so much easier, like Ed said yesterday, I was asking him, hey, would you be willing to do this? And people are willing to do that a lot more so even at the last minute because they don't have to travel. And so, you can get people, especially like an animal health issue, you can get people from the State Department of Agriculture. You can even pull people in from USDA if it's that big of an issue, and give that pertinent information right then and not have to wait.
Well, I hate dead space, so I'll be glad to add a few things as well. I agree with Carrie. The face-to-face is very nice because you can really develop those relationships. You're able to read the verbal cues from your audience and things. But the reality of it nowadays is that, and Carrie again mentioned it, time and money. It costs our states, it costs our programs lots of dollars that we could be pumping into direct programming if we could do it. The key really is, for me, is the engagement. Online learning has to be as engaging as you can do with your face-to-face sessions. You can't just sit back and deliver your programs or throw a slide up on a thing. You actually have to get people involved with being engaged in part of that whole thing. I want to share a quick slide here, and this for me says it all. And for what we have to do is get our people ready to get out of their comfort zone and head in a different direction. Look at it as an adventure. Whether it's the presenters, who I've had a lot of problems with sometimes delivering content because they're scared to death of it sometimes. This is the first time on Zoom for me. You can probably tell I'm really nervous, but it's just, whether it's our audience or whether it's our presenters, it's important to say and be okay, like we're going to make mistakes and, challenge yourself and do something different.
So Ed, you mentioned being interactive, and this is for all of the panelists. How do you be interactive on an online format when you're in a webinar, or whether it's a online course or any of these things? What are some of the tips and tricks that you have used to keep things interesting when you're online and to keep the participants' attention?
Well, real simple and a basic thing that you can utilize to get some of the conversation started are simple poll questions. Whether it's Adobe Connect, I use On24 as another platform that I use. I'm not sure if Zoom has it. I think it does. It's probably a poll question. So simply putting up a poll question to initiate some conversation, have people respond in the chat boxes. We do a lot of crowdsourcing. One of the best that I've ever been in, Harriet Edwards from North Carolina State was doing a thing on developing roles for volunteer leaders, and I think Stacy MacArthur did a session for me on figuring out how to reward volunteers. Within a minute and a half, we probably had 50 or 60 ideas that we could share with our participants just by brainstorming, typing in the chat box, and then being able to turn that into a PDF file. So, polls and crowdsourcing is important. It's important for us to know that engagement is more than just a mouse click too. Like, having somebody click or type on their keyboard is one way, but we can differentiate the product. We can show a video and discuss a video. We can do any number of things to get people involved. I would suggest to you to think about how you like stuff delivered to you. I personally get pretty bored if things are just dumped on me. So I'm going to let some of our colleagues here share some of their thoughts.
We do have a question, but I can let Carrie and Karen respond to the one on the floor at the moment, and then we can bring up the question that's been asked.
I have my mic open. Let's see, I can go. I was just going to add to that I think the openness to online meetings and online webinars has definitely increased over the years, and that travel, the ability to travel through funding or some other resources a lot of times has decreased. But really, also the exciting part about bringing people together that normally wouldn't come together and exchanging ideas and recipes, that's what I get really excited about. And kind of, to learn in the flow. Some of the things we want people to know, you can't actually do right away or maybe even next week. It's going to take time to develop a new skill. And so to have more frequent interaction via technology and allow them to implement it as they're going along in their real world environment, I think is one of the nice benefits of this online training as well. But I can read. Would you like me to read?
I was just going to jump in too and give one other tip that, just when we're doing face-to-face trainings, we always we always call on people to answer questions. I will do the same thing in a webinar. I keep look at the attendees list, and I may say, I noticed, I think Nancy Franz is on this. So as I'm presenting, I may say, hey, Nancy, what do you think about this idea? So it keeps them engaged and it kind of keeps them on their toes, just like a face-to-face.
Great. We do have a question that kind of goes along with what you guys were talking about. And Rich was wanting to know, are you seeing a change in the attitude from folks who have experienced training or methods using online learning and meeting methods? Here in Arkansas, we've noticed that once they've had a good experience with learning or meeting online, they actually have been requesting that we use it more often than face-to-face methods. So yeah,
I'd like to jump in and respond to that quickly. And I've noticed this from my early work with the e-conference for the 4-H science stuff. Is initially there was a lot of hesitation and people like, oh, I'm not sure about this. But each time we do it, the feedback that we're getting from everybody is thank you. These things are so engaging. We're getting the same content. We don't have to spend time traveling. And for some of them, the other bit of feedback is, wow, I can watch the recording because I can't make every session. So if you're archiving things and you're making sure that folks have access to either watch it for the first time or go back and review it, I'm seeing a big trend. I think the people that I've interacted with are loving it now. And each time they do it, they get more comfortable doing it.
An example of one where I see a lot more excitement, or not, I don't know if that's the way to phrase it, but so in 2011 we had started a virtual conference where we did 8 webinars in a week, and we started out doing it just for the Idaho staff, and that was a time that we could do, here's some new curriculum, here's a new concept, just some of those variety of pieces. Then the next year, we actually opened it up to the entire Western region to participate. And this last year, in 2015, in January, we actually opened it up nationwide. And we had participants from Hawaii to Massachusetts on that on those webinars. And it was a great way to share resources across the states. The one example we had was one of the educators in Idaho started using a new 4-H curriculum on, I can't even remember which one it was now, but the authors of the curriculum actually got onto the webinar and were able to learn how it's being used in other places. And so made the poor presenter really, really nervous, but it was a great way for her to, showcase what she had been doing as well. And I think that's what online staff development does. What I really appreciate is, and what I see the attitude changing is, we're all using it, and so we can share resources across the country nowadays. And I think that's where I get more and more requests. Learn on e-extension has been a huge piece as well.
And if you guys have any ideas or things that you want to add on, go ahead and put that in the Q&A box as well. So, and as I speak, somebody sent in a question. So, Julie wants to know, are you guys familiar with any good articles, research-based about the value of online learning?
I have found a few in Joe. The biggest issue I have found with online staff development is how to evaluate it. I haven't, and I'm still trying to figure out how to both evaluate the presentation itself and also evaluate, that on the other side, or, and then looking at how that relates to online or to face-to-face and which one works. But I haven't seen a whole lot. That might be because I just haven't had a lot of time to go out and look. Penn State has some really good resources, though, on online learning that I found a lot, especially on evaluating them.
I found there's information that I have, a good place to go. I'm a member of the e-learning guild, and they have tremendous resources there. Unfortunately, you have to pay to be a member and access the research that way because it's proprietary. I can't necessarily share it. But there are other blogs, a lot of different blogs, and I don't have my resource list here in front of me. But there's a lot of places that you can go to get that information just by doing a simple Google search, and again, under Google Scholarship or whatever it's called. But there's a number of different places to go, and there's a lot of companies out there that do e-learning, and they will have actually some content. You have to vet it because they're selling a product, but you want to make sure that it's matching up with what other people in the industry are saying as well.
I'm wondering, does anyone know of any examples of maybe an extension institution which has kind of done a little bit of a trial where they've sent a group of new agents through the traditional face-to-face and at the same time sent some through online, or if not, why we're not doing something like that to really demonstrate and measure what the value is of online staff development, and does it match up with what we've been doing face-to-face?
It's my new project in Nevada, Kevin. I don't know of any examples. I don't know if Karen and Ed do.
Well, that was a little bit. That was my master's research was on the online versus the face-to-face.
Karen, hold on just 1 second. You've got really bad feedback.
Try it again.
Try it again, Karen.
Is that better?
Oh, no, it's echoing really bad on our end.
Karen, go ahead and go out of your participant view, and Ed, if you want to jump in here, or somebody else while she's checking that, go out of the second device. Unmute.
Can you repeat the question? I was actually multitasking here, looking for some of those resources I could share with everybody.
Sure. I was wondering if you knew of anyone who has done more of a controlled trial of, here's a group who has gone through the online, here's someone who's gone through the face-to-face, and comparing the results, or if not, why we're not doing a little bit more of that in extension work of really demonstrating empirically the value of online versus face-to-face learning.
I don't know of any research. I can't wait for Carrie to complete that and share it with everybody. All I know, though, from my experience, is that there's a need by our organization to deliver things in a different way, in a more cost and time efficient manner. So the research has to come. I'm not aware of any yet.
Is the feedback still bad?
It's a little bit better than it was. Why don't you talk for a little bit and we'll see how we go.
Okay, well, I'm sorry to do that. I don't hear the feedback on my end, so are we okay?
Check your plug for your headset and see if it's plugged in all. It's kind of staticky, but it's much better than it was.
Okay.
I think you're good.
Am I? I just moved my computer away from my screen. Okay. So that's the value of being flexible, right? You can just move things and it works. That's what my research was on in 2001, was comparing the online to face-to-face training. And I don't know necessarily if that's the same as staff development, but I think one of the things it would be hard to say that online learning is better or equal, because there's just so many types of variety. So every situation is so different. I think that's one of the struggles. And even when I look back on my research, we had a lecture format for the online, and we had basically kind of a course where people would read articles at the time. It was way before Adobe Connect was prevalent. And so people would read articles and take quizzes, so it was a little bit different. And of course, Master Gardeners are so motivated to learn. Their knowledge outcomes on the post-test were equal. And maybe that would differ for other forms of professional development. But I think it depends on how you do it. But I think you have to be really careful about making generalizations, because there's just so many different types of online learning. So I guess
following up on that, then we tend to use a lot of webinars in Extension. I think that's kind of our standard operating procedure. But what are some of those other formats? Anyone feel free to jump in on kind of the new cutting edge things, or some older technologies that maybe we're just not using to our full advantage in Extension to get training out to our staff.
One of the things I think that would work, and reflect back to some of my experiences. I actually attended the World Campus at Penn State University, did some online master's work there. Those experiences for me, and this is all anecdotal, those experiences for me were better than any face-to-face training class that I ever attended. As a participant, you couldn't hide. You had to be involved. You had to share your observations. You had to reflect. You had to provide feedback for folks. And I think that's what, as I develop some training, and I'm actually starting to work on some projects with a couple big donors where we're going to form a community of practice where we're going to be able to share either face-to-face, like this, on one of these platforms, but also have a discussion thread, an asynchronous opportunity where you can blend it all together and use all the different forms, because we're all not going to be able to attend a face-to-face session or have those meetings. But we can do some outside reading. We can share, still provide feedback, and be part of the whole learning environment.
I was going to give an example too of where I've used old technology and combined it with new technology or newer technology. So I think it was 2013 or 2014, I can't remember now, I had this idea that I wanted to get our professionals so they had a better understanding of what the research was that was out there. And so we started what we called the 4-H PB&J Club. It was a professional book and journal club. And so journal articles were selected. And the old technology that we used was the articles were sent out to professionals, and they read them, and then we had a conference call to discuss those articles, and there was a facilitator, like a book club, where you would have that discussion. And then the new technology that we brought in, it was a webinar again, but I think you could do, I was just sitting here thinking, gosh, we could do something like this with a Zoom, more of a conversation. But what we would do is have either the author of that journal article or somebody that I knew was a leading researcher in that area that would then expand upon that topic and give a little bit more research or give a little bit more information about that topic. And that was really a great way to kind of blend that old technology and new technology, and knowing that we couldn't get staff together on a regular basis to have a book group, a discussion group on articles, and so using the conference call. But you could do a Zoom that way, or I was just thinking, gosh, we could have the authors come in and do a Zoom and have more of this informal discussion with the authors.
So I've got another question. What are some of the challenges that we still face, kind of the wicked problems of moving our institutions more towards online when it comes to staff development? And what's going to get us from point A to point B in terms of truly embracing this or being able to do a better job at what we're doing? What are we still facing in terms of really being successful in what we do online?
I have a few answers and observations over the years. One of the things I think is being okay with failing and learning, having a fail plan, and making space for staff to learn and personal learning. You know, really asking questions and going out and finding the blog posts and having conversations with people to learn. And that landscape has really changed. So it's become really nuanced to learn in online environments or just life, I think. Watching my children on their technology really shows me how different the world's going to be and how they learn. They learn through their questions. They search it, they find it out, they test it. And I see us moving to that. So we need room to have space to do that, and we need room to fail. And then we need people like professional development support staff and communications staff. We need teams of people that really help the whole organization learn. That's my opinion anyway, because it's always changing. We're behavior changing every day, and our audiences are doing the same. So the more our staff do that, the more our audience or community members hopefully will do that as well, or be able to.
Okay. Anybody else want to jump on that one? We have a question that has been asked. So to everybody, what has been your experience with the success of any form of staff development and the degree of administrative support? Agents in her state won't engage in training because they need that they need because no one is holding them accountable at the end of the day.
That's a whole different question than virtual technology. That has to do with supervision and holding somebody's feet to the fire. But and you know, all we can do is build it, and all we can do is deliver it. But you know, not holding somebody accountable is a whole different story. And unfortunately, for the people that develop the content and train online, maybe it shouldn't be their responsibility to do that part of it.
One thing I've been known to do is I've been known to send a list of participants to our administrators. Not that they're being held accountable for participating, but those administrators can see who's consistently going through professional development. And to me, you know, now as an administrator, that's going to, you know, I'm going to look at them and say, oh, they're really putting an effort in. And, you know, maybe, you know, and granted, they may have more time than others, but it does, I think, just as a person who delivers virtual or coordinates online staff development, I think it's just keeping the administrator in the loop of who's participating and who's not is going to be one key. I would like to see people held a little more accountable. You know, so in a lot of states with 4-H volunteers and with our Master Gardener volunteers, we require them to get so many hours of training a year, but we don't do it for our own staff.
One of the things we're talking about in Texas is using an online system that we're evaluating right now to kind of create a transcript of all the professional development that an agent or a specialist may want to take advantage of, that they would self-report, and that could go towards one of a number of different certificates that they would receive, and that would basically give them a reason to participate, allow them to document that, and then string together multiple separate experiences, events, trainings that may be somewhat unrelated, but put those together into a package that they can say, all of these activities together has given me the ability to become proficient in area X or Y, and now we would then at a state level award them a certificate. Have you had any success with or any attempts to not just do kind of a standalone here or there, but put together a complete curriculum, a complete certificate program, more of a comprehensive effort, or are we still just using online staff development as a kind of one-off, a la carte here and there type of activity?
I haven't developed anything like that. However, I'm aware of University of Minnesota has some tremendous models that they've developed for volunteer development and volunteer management and those kind of things. So there are folks out there in the world that are doing that. I haven't done that. I would like to get that. I know that we with the program that we're using, we're able to provide certificates and things like that. We can do surveys and those kind of things, but we haven't done anything as deeply yet as that. But I think it would be wise to do it.
I was going to say University of Minnesota is probably the best example of that I know of at this point. You know, I mean, I've put together a curriculum, but it's not really a series, but it's not been a certificate program. It could very easily be turned into one, but.
We received a response in the Q&A box and said, kind of in regards to one of my questions earlier, we've got to begin to quantify dollar savings, including time of participants and presenters. That dollar value is what will help administrators to see the value and support the use of online learning and meetings, etc. So, what are you when you're putting these online trainings on? Are you getting a dollar figure savings per person? Have you been able to quantify that? What are you seeing as some of the benefits and time savings and cost?
I've never done the dollar savings, but one question that I ask on evaluations when I do webinars is, would you be willing to attend this webinar face-to-face if it was within a certain, mileage? Because I found when I asked that question just in general, they would say, well, no, because I'm not going to travel more than, 5 minutes or whatever. So I say, if it's within an hour of your location, would you be willing to travel? So that kind of gives me an idea of the value of it, and then you could take that and determine what the dollar value of savings would be by people staying in their office, because we do have a range of salaries. We kind of know what people's salaries are, so you could do that.
The one instance that I actually did that because I was curious. Back in 2014, I worked with National 4-H Headquarters and National 4-H Council on a face-to-face meeting in Chevy Chase, Maryland, where we brought in state program leaders from across the country so that we could start figuring out what our vision, what direction of 4-H was going to head. This year, I actually helped to host that same conference, only we did it using Adobe Connect. Actually, it was one of those times I was able to manage it from Ottawa, Canada, in a hotel room, unfortunately. But that's a good thing about virtual, isn't it? That we can do it wherever we are. But the comparison of the price of that event, we did it this year. The only thing it cost us, we had the platform already. People were going to develop, their parts of it already. People were, all that management time that we would have in the face-to-face. But in the previous year, when we brought everybody in, it cost $57,000 to do that, to bring everybody in from across the country. So in that case, we had a tremendous savings. And like Carrie said, we're the benefit of being able to do online training is you're going to reach people that couldn't get there any other way. And I only imagine, and Karen can speak to that, what kind of value would you see of training master gardeners and folks like that using technology?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's tremendous value. I've been involved with smaller teams of master gardeners, and they find it extremely beneficial to get together and exchange insights. And some of the professional development that's on eXtension Learn has been helpful as well. The Military Families Learning Network was really designed to help military service professionals all across the country and all across the globe attend professional development and earn CEUs. And they used to do a lot of this through face-to-face conferences, and with reduced budgets, they've moved, and that's part of why the Military Families Learning Network exists, is to provide professional development online. So you could make the case for how many CEUs, which I don't have on hand right now, we've provided for military service professionals, and then show the cost savings and travel dollars and that kind of thing. But I do want to make a case for online training is not just about replacing things. It changes the way people work. It changes our reach. It changes the way we connect and get information to enrich our organization. So I think it's also important. There's some great models of community growth. The GRAPES community of practice, Eric Staffney published a report on evaluating that community of practice and how the growth in the community changed over time. So I think it's important to not only look at it as a replacement, but to look at it in other ways of how this kind of online training and connectivity affects the organization's long-term success as well.
And to go along with what you guys have been talking about, Rich added in the Q&A box, it used to be that administrators weren't aware of how we used online learning and technology to deliver training and hold meetings. And once we demonstrated the value of using online methods and how we were saving time and money, they're now looking at face-to-face activities and asking, can we do that on Zoom? That's a major factor in helping our faculty and others see the support that such methods are getting from administrators.
I was just going to comment on that, and that's probably the biggest thing that I've seen is the administrative support. A few years ago, so in Idaho, there are topic teams, so kind of like our communities of practice, but they're topic teams, and they create the plan of work. Well, for 4-H, that's a really tough thing to do, and for many of them, because it's very costly to bring everybody together for 2 or 3 days and sit down and hash out the plan of work. While I see the value of the face-to-face, 2 or 3 years ago, the 4-H side of things decided, well, we're going to try using Adobe Connect. And everybody come in and have these conversations, have our overall conversation, and then we're going to put everybody into breakout rooms and have those conversations individually. And we invited our associate director, who's in charge of the topic teams, to be a part of that, and gave him hosting responsibilities so he could jump from room to room and see the conversations. And now he's telling all of the topic teams that that's how they need to do it, instead of having one big, 3 or 4 days, workshop or face-to-face training. I haven't figured out in Zoom how you can do breakout groups. That's one of my, I'm not sure if it's an option, but I'm trying, because I know in my new position in Nevada, the thing when they asked what some of the factors were of preventing us from doing a lot of online staff development, and I know one of my major factors is going to be cost. I have to find a platform, because they're not going to pay $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 to buy into Adobe. I've got to find that cost-effective program, platform that I can use. Currently they're still using video conferencing, so which will be changing on the 4-H side of things.
Do you think that for an institution which is just kind of getting into and getting their feet wet with online learning, that there might be a devaluation of certain programs, that if they're put online versus face-to-face, then the agents out in the field start to think perhaps, okay, if it's an important topic, the administration is going to bring us in. If it's not important, if we don't need to care about it, they're going to do it online. And do you think that they take that less seriously when you're new to online staff development, and how do you overcome that if that's the case?
I'm going to tell them it's important, so whether that means anything, I don't know, but it's going to be interesting. I could probably get about 20 journal articles out of my new experiment experimentation that we're doing in there. But, Karen and Ed, do you have any other thoughts on, that kind of the value that our staff see it?
If I can kind of jump in on that, sorry, I'm not on the panel, but Mary and I just kind of gave each other a look over here. I'm coordinating we have a monthly session for all of our new agents that come in, and we've had some struggles where we've had to let that new agent know that just because it's online doesn't mean it's optional. It's in the same classification as an in-person in-service, or an online's the same thing. And I know, just talking with some others, that we've had some struggles with some of our staff chairs too. They've started to do monthly sessions, and some of them we've had to kind of go, do you guys realize that you need to dress a certain way too if you're going to be online? Because just in case our director comes in, you kind of don't want to be showing up in your camo t-shirt because you just came out of the deer stand into the office. So that's something that we've struggled with, and so it's kind of an education thing on our side with that.
With the right technology, you can stay in your deer stand and still do your training.
I was going to say, I had to get up this morning and actually put on makeup because I'm not in my office today. I'm actually in Idaho. So for all of you, out there, you get to see, and I put on a nice shirt I couldn't just throw on. But no, I agree exactly. I think that is a real key piece, is just making sure that they understand that it's not optional. And, just because it's online doesn't mean that it's less important.
Well, now I've gone so far working with folks who are directing the training. You can build in some of that engagement stuff, so you can actually track whether people are paying attention or otherwise, whether you're using poll questions, whether you're using directed questions where you're having them respond in a chat box. There are ways to find out and figure out. I know with the platform I use, On24, I can track all sorts of engagement things, number of clicks and which widgets are opening and using. And I hate to get to that point where I have to police those things, but there's tools that are built into some of the systems. Even Adobe Connect, you can get in and get their poll results and see who's answering questions. So you're right, though. Some people will get on. I had peers back in the state that would do an Adobe Connect session, and they would do their email, or they'd be searching Google for shoes or whatever. I mean, there's other things that happen.
Yeah, I'd like to just add that I think it's really our job to be engaging. When you look at a school teacher, the best school teachers hold their students accountable by asking them the questions about their learning and really reading their students. And so, I think it all comes back to really finding out how people need to learn. There's a lot of talk, I know, among learning and development professionals about learner empathy, drawing empathy maps. It's a really great place to start thinking about what are people's questions, how are they receptive to learning that information. And so I think it really sets the bar higher for us. We have to work harder at gaining people's attention, but that creates better learning opportunities too. So eventually it ends up being a win-win.
Well, that's what a lot of our leaders don't understand, is that sometimes it takes more to create what you're doing virtually and being able to build in that engagement stuff. And folks that don't really know it think that it takes less time.
Karen also brought up something that I just wanted, when she talked about being engaging. One of the things that it's taken me a while to learn, but with Zoom, we almost always have a camera. I know in Adobe Connect, typically don't have a camera. On24, I can't remember. Usually when you're presenting, you don't necessarily have a camera. But what I found is when I have presenters that read a script, because they think, oh, I'm just doing it virtually, nobody will see me, it's okay, and they read a script, you can tell. You can still tell just as well as somebody standing in front of the classroom or in front of a group with a piece of paper in their hand. And so really trying to remind our presenters too, we need to make this conversationalist just like you would, face to face. I know you can't read cues off of people, but you can still kind of get cues out of the chat box. This group has been pretty engaged in asking questions, and so I'm feeling like I've got some pretty good cues. It's probably one of the reasons why I like Zoom a little bit more so, because it is more interactive.
Okay, with the short amount of time we have left, does any of our participants have any last questions, burning questions? So we do have an observation. It could be just me. This is reading from the person's comment. But I would swear that the eyes of that deer on Ed's wall are following me when I move around in my chair. So that's one of the comments. If anybody has any last questions they would like to add or ask, or anything that our panelists would like to add as we close out today?
A couple things that I would like to add are just some of the resources that I've used in helping to develop presentations. I think one of the most painful things for me is when I'm attending a training is the folks that will put 1,000 words of text on a PowerPoint slide, and it's brutal, to keep things simple. I have 5 resources I would like to share with you, and I'll do a quick show and tell. Webinars with wow factor. Okay, that's just one. It gives you a bunch of ideas on how to engage folks. Another one called Better Than Bullet Points. Beyond Bullet Points. Another great one called Slideology, which I love this one. But my favorite one is called Presentation Zen. And it just helps with the development of slides for your presentations. And again, just making sure that if you have one key graphic and you're speaking to that, I've attended a couple conferences where somebody will just show a picture and that's all they have. And then they'll use their words and put all the notes into their slide thing. That's all I have. Thanks.
I was going to share another resource that I found, and I can't remember the author of the book right now, but the book is called The Exceptional Presenter Goes Virtual. And about 3 or 4 years ago now, I can't remember how long ago it was, I did a presentation on it at NAEPSDP at that conference, and then I've also done it, I also now have done it as a webinar. So anytime I host a virtual training, if I have a new presenter who's never done a webinar before, I will put them through that presentation and have them learn, some of those basics. I mean, it talks about lighting and it talks about all of those pieces and some of the PowerPoint stuff. So that is an outstanding resource as well.
I do not have a resource. I love Slideology and the book accompanying it, Resonate, which Nancy Duarte is the author of as well. I think for me, I have found that online training, there's not any one size fits all, and it really requires you to ask what the purpose of it, and is it better, or is it a better environment? Does it meet your needs versus not? And so to be thinking about that purpose statement is extremely important. And then that lets you evaluate, the things you need to evaluate if you're doing a good job or not. But if we equate the training, the old, the standard workshop to online training, I don't think that's nuanced enough. There's a lot of variability and possibilities that could arise out of your creativity. So think about purpose and be creative with it, because there's a lot of fun things that can be done.
All right. Well, thank you to our presenters and our moderator for joining us today. I hope that I got a lot of information out of there. I hope that everyone in the audience came with some takeaways. These are always great to get to come together and have a discussion rather than just having one person talk with us the whole time. And so a lot of fun here. A couple things coming up that I want to let everyone know about. Our next webinar will be 2 weeks from today, about this exact same time. So the fourth Thursday of every month, we will have a free webinar. These are actually open to everyone in cooperative extension or at your university. They are topics of general interest. And so Paul Hill, who is a social media guru, will be talking to us about some social media tips and tricks and tools and things like that. And so Paul is a great, exceptional resource on this subject. So I know that you and your colleagues will benefit from this. Again, we'll have a webinar every Thursday, fourth Thursday of the month. And then we will do another Member Connect 2 months from now. So that will be August 13th, also at 1 o'clock Central Time. And that webinar will be on a new technology showcase. So if you are using a new technology, computer system, website, whatever that is, app, we're going to let our panelists kind of show off what they've been using, testing out in the field, and have found to be useful for extension. And so that will be coming up as well pretty soon. And then our next one will be October, will be our next Member Connect, and that will be on a reporting system. So we're all going to log on to our reporting systems and show those off and what's working for us, what's not, tips and tricks, and get to see some good examples of how we're keeping our agents and specialists accountable. Until then, we'll hopefully see most of you in 2 weeks, and then again in 2 months for our next Member Connect. So thank you so much. Y'all have a great day.
And we hope to see you all in San Diego in December for our national meeting.
Absolutely. December 1st through 3rd, we will be, Carrie and I were just down there in San Diego, and the weather's great. I think we'll still be great in December. I think it'd be great no matter what time of the year you go. The hotel is lovely. We got to go up to the suite level up on the 19th floor, and the views cannot be topped. And the quality of presentations, I think, are going to be great as well. So we will have those requests for presentations coming out right after the 4th of July holiday. So be thinking about attending and presenting at that conference.